He called me a clueless little girl. In front of the entire boardroom, and the worst part? No one said a word. Not one person flinched. Not even the woman from HR who had warned me weeks before that working under him was like walking barefoot on glass. I stood there frozen, clutching the corner of the conference table so tightly I thought the polished wood would crack beneath my fingers. My cheeks burned. My vision blurred. The silence in the room echoed louder than the insult itself. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just sat down slowly, smiled through the humiliation, and waited for the day I would bury him with the truth. I wasn't born to play small. Growing up in a 2-bedroom trailer just outside Lubbock, Texas, I learned early that the world doesn't hand anything to girls like me. My mother cleaned houses and took night shifts at a local diner to make sure I could attend school. I still remember the way her hands looked, dry, calloused, red from bleach, and the way she'd kiss my forehead before falling asleep in her uniform. She used to tell me, "Make them remember you, Olivia. Not for your smile. For your mind." I did just that. I studied my way to the top of every class, earned a full ride to UT Austin, and graduated magna cum laude with a degree in data analytics. But it wasn't the degree that got me to Los Angeles. It was the way I could break down billion-dollar problems with a whiteboard and a dry erase marker. When I landed the 3-month trial position at Stonebridge & Mason, one of the top consulting firms in California, I knew I had one shot. I packed everything I had into 2 suitcases, kissed my mother goodbye, and boarded a one-way flight to LAX. The office was polished glass, chrome elevators, and espresso machines that looked more expensive than my car. The people were colder than the marble floors. From day one, I knew I didn't belong. Not really. They called me fresh blood. Some whispered about diversity hires when I walked by. But I ignored it. I had a job to do. 2 weeks in, the senior partners put out a call. Stonebridge had just acquired a potential new client, TexanGrid, a private energy firm with a reputation for high risk and higher reward. Their infrastructure needed a revamp, and they were looking for a consultancy that could deliver. $47 million was on the table. I worked 14-hour days for 3 straight weeks. I missed calls from my mom. I stopped buying groceries. I lived on black coffee and vending machine almonds. But I was building something brilliant, a comprehensive strategy that didn't just save TexanGrid money. It restructured how their licenses and data integrations worked altogether. I ran projections. I tested models. I rebuilt the entire concept when I saw a 4.6% gap in year 3 return. Every single slide in that pitch deck came from my head. Every color, every word, every number. I didn't sleep because I believed that if I nailed this project, they wouldn't see me as the girl from Texas anymore. They'd see me as someone who belonged. The night before the team was set to fly to Dallas for the pitch, I stayed late one last time to triple-check my numbers. Around 9:30 p.m., I left my laptop open and ran down to grab a soda from the break room. When I returned, I stopped cold. He was sitting at my desk. My boss. He looked up, startled for just a moment, then smiled. "Didn't know you were still here," he said, cool and casual. Like he wasn't scrolling through my personal drive. My heart thudded. I just needed to recheck the forecast model. He clicked once more and closed the tab. "Don't overthink it. You've already done more than enough." I didn't sleep that night. Something about the way he said, "more than enough," stuck in my head like a splinter. The next morning, in the elevator, one of the HR analysts I barely knew leaned in and whispered, "Watch your back. He's known for stealing thunder." I wanted to ask her what she meant, but the doors opened, and she was gone. The flight to Dallas was quiet. Tense. He sat 2 rows ahead of me, typing something into his laptop, earbuds in, smiling to himself. I kept staring at the back of his head, heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe it was the way he hadn't mentioned my work at all during the pre-flight call. Maybe it was the fact that the official meeting agenda had been edited at the last minute, and my name was nowhere on it. Still, I held on to hope. I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, the partners knew I'd been leading this pitch from the start. I'd sent them my outline, my projections, my models. They'd praised it. They'd CC'd me. I was safe, right? We arrived at the downtown Marriott late in the evening. I went straight to my room, pulled out my laptop, and rehearsed my portion of the pitch until my throat went dry. I made final notes, adjusted transitions, and resaved my deck one last time. I even recorded myself doing the full walkthrough and played it back twice. I was ready. The morning of the presentation, I walked into the conference center in a navy suit I'd borrowed from my cousin back in Texas. My palms were slick with sweat, but I held my head high. I smiled at the receptionist. I greeted the partners. I took my seat near the end of the long mahogany table. And then he walked in. My boss. Grinning. Confident. Carrying a laptop under one arm like a prized weapon. "I'll be leading today's presentation," he announced. "But Olivia helped gather some research." My breath caught. He plugged in his device. The screen flickered. The title slide appeared. "Strategic Realignment Plan for TexanGrid by his name." I sat there stunned. It was my deck. Word for word. Design for design. Color palette, graphs, embedded video, every pixel stolen. I looked around the table, expecting someone, anyone, to object. No one did. Some of the older partners glanced at me, puzzled, but said nothing. The client didn't know any better. He launched into the presentation like he owned it. He cracked jokes. He paced the floor. He even paused at the parts I'd crafted with the most care, selling them like they were spontaneous flashes of genius. When he reached the budget breakdown slide, the one that took me 2 sleepless nights to model, he winked at the CFO and said, "You'll like this part." They laughed. I sat perfectly still, every nerve in my body screaming. I could barely hear over the roar in my ears. I didn't know whether to cry or vomit or walk out. My hands were trembling in my lap, nails digging into skin. He closed the pitch with a flourish. The client applauded. One of the partners stood up and shook his hand. "Well done," someone said. "Brilliant strategy." I was invisible. Afterward, as everyone mingled and exchanged cards, I walked out. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just walked 2 blocks to a coffee shop, ordered an espresso I couldn't afford, and sat down with my laptop. I replayed the voice memo I'd recorded the night before. I opened the Slack thread where I'd shared early outlines with him, weeks before he ever mentioned contributing. I pulled up the original file on my Google Drive, with timestamps and edit history. And I stared at it all for a long time. Because in that moment, something broke. Not my spirit. Not my faith in myself. What broke was the part of me that thought staying quiet would keep me safe. Back in Los Angeles, the office buzzed with celebration. Word spread fast. TexanGrid was impressed, and we were on track to close one of the largest deals in the firm's recent history. My boss strutted through the corridors like a conquering general. He high-fived junior analysts. He cracked jokes with the partners in the elevator. Not once did he say my name. I watched from behind my screen, silent. I answered emails. I attended meetings. I smiled when people congratulated the team. I played along. But inside, I was building a storm. On Monday morning, the whole division gathered for a company-wide debrief in the main conference room. The TexanGrid pitch was the first item on the agenda. My boss stood at the front, sleeves rolled up, voice booming. "That was the cleanest execution of a pitch I've ever seen. This is what happens when we push mediocrity aside and let real strategy lead." People laughed. I didn't. He scrolled through the deck again. My deck. flashing slide after slide without a single nod to the person who created it. And then, like some twisted encore, he motioned toward me. Olivia had an idea, he said, smirking. But let's be honest, it wasn't grounded. Her model underestimated volatility. It looked more like something from a college capstone than a real client plan. Snickers rippled through the room. I stared at the screen, willing myself not to react. She's got potential, he added with mock sincerity. But she's still learning. We can't hand the wheel to someone who just got here. That was the moment. It wasn't the theft that broke me. It wasn't the lies. It wasn't even the silence. It was the smugness. The way he turned my work into a weapon against me. After the meeting, I sat at my desk, hands trembling, heart pounding. The Slack notifications blurred. The phones rang around me. The office hummed. But I was somewhere else. Somewhere cold. Focused. Clear. I opened a new email. Subject line: Urgent breach of intellectual property, supported by time-stamped evidence. I attached everything. The original pitch deck, with my name in the metadata. Screenshots of the version he presented, with my file structure still visible in the corner of one slide. Audio from my rehearsal. Slack conversations showing him asking me to send over the draft for review. 2 weeks before. I copied the entire executive board. Legal. Compliance. HR. I didn't write a long message. Just this. What was presented to TexanGrid was not authored by his name. It was developed entirely by me. The following attachments provide proof. Please advise on next steps. I hovered my mouse over the send button. My chest was tight. My mouth was dry. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I clicked send. And then I waited. The first few minutes after sending the email felt like standing on the edge of a cliff during a thunderstorm, heart thundering, every nerve lit up. Unsure if the ground would give way or if I just jumped into a war I couldn't win. At first, nothing happened. The office moved around me as if nothing had shifted. As if I hadn't just exposed one of the firm's top executives to the entire leadership team. But then, 5 minutes in, I noticed the Slack channels go quiet. No more gifts. No more congratulatory backpats. Just silence. 10 minutes in, I saw the VP of Legal walk briskly past my desk, phone to her ear, face pale. At exactly 9:37 a.m. A calendar invite appeared in my inbox. Emergency leadership call, 9:45 a.m., private link. I wasn't invited. But I didn't need to be. I already knew. From the corner of my eye. I saw him get the same notification. His smile faltered for the first time in days. He looked up, scanned the room, and locked eyes with me. I didn't blink. He stood, still trying to play it cool, and walked to the glass conference room where a few of the partners were already waiting. He stepped inside, and the door closed behind him. I could see everything. The first 5 minutes were calm. Him talking. Gesturing. That confident, lazy grin back on his face. But slowly, the mood shifted. One of the partners leaned forward, pointed at something on their laptop. Another partner turned their screen toward him. I watched his expression change, eyebrows furrowed, eyes narrowing. He leaned in. Scrolled. Paused. Then he looked up again. Not at me. Just into the air, like he'd seen a ghost. At 10:12 a.m., HR pinged me directly. Hi Olivia, can you come up to the executive floor for a quick chat? They didn't use emojis this time. I walked in to find the director of HR, the general counsel, and one of the senior partners seated around a sleek black table. They didn't offer coffee. The director folded her hands and said, very carefully, "First, I want to thank you for how professionally you've handled this." I didn't speak. "We've reviewed the materials you sent. It's conclusive." They walked me through the next steps. There would be an investigation, formal documentation, interviews. But the short version? They believed me. They believed every word. And he? By noon, he was gone. Not on leave. Not transferred. Gone. Security walked him out of the building in full view of the team. He didn't say a word. He didn't look at me. He just pressed the elevator button with shaking hands, clutching a box that didn't seem big enough to hold a career. That afternoon, an internal email went out to all staff. Effective immediately. His name is no longer with Stonebridge and Mason. We remain committed to integrity, accountability, and honoring the voices of every team member. No one laughed at me in the halls after that. No one called me the girl from Texas. They called me by my name. The air in the office shifted after that day. People spoke more softly around me, with this strange blend of caution and curiosity. Like I'd walked out of a fire without a single burn. Some avoided eye contact altogether. Others, mostly women, a few interns, even a quiet engineer from the IT team, stopped me in the break room, whispering words like "thank you" or "you did what we all wished we could." But I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. HR offered me a settlement. A generous one. A fat check and a quiet agreement to walk away and never speak of this again. I didn't take it. Because I didn't want money. I wanted credit. I wanted my name on the pitch I built from nothing. I wanted the right to lead what came next. I wanted the very seat he'd occupied. When I told them that, they stared at me like I'd just flipped the table. But they agreed. The following Monday, I was moved into a private office 2 floors up. New title, Director of Strategic Innovation. I got a company laptop, my own assistant, and a calendar filled with meetings I actually wanted to attend. But the real reward came weeks later, when I flew back to Dallas, not as a tag-along, not as junior staff, but as the lead consultant in charge of rolling out the Texan Grid implementation. The client's boardroom felt different this time. They greeted me like I mattered. They asked questions. They took notes when I spoke. They didn't blink when I explained a pivot in the licensing model, or why I'd structured the 3-year plan the way I did. One of the senior VPs, a man in his 60s with oil on his boots and steel in his spine, looked at me after my final slide and said, "You're sharp as hell. You remind me of someone I worked with years ago. She built a company from scratch. Made every man in the room nervous." I smiled. Good. Later that night, I sat alone in my hotel room, staring out at the Texas skyline. My home state looked the same as it always had, wide open, humming with heat, but I was different. I wasn't that girl anymore. I called my mother. When she picked up, I didn't tell her about the office or the deal or the raise. I just said, "Mom, they know my name now." She didn't say anything at first. And then, softly, "I always did." That's when it hit me, not the fear, not the anger, but the weight of what I'd done. Of what I refused to let die in silence. Some people get ahead by stepping over others. Some build ladders out of stolen work. But some of us? We fight like hell to protect our voice. And when that voice finally echoes loud enough, no one can take it from us again. 3 months later, I walked into the annual Leadership Summit in San Francisco, not as a footnote, not as a shadow behind someone else's spotlight, but as a featured speaker. My photo was printed in the brochure. My name was listed on the main stage agenda, right below a partner from Bain and a CTO from Meta. The room was packed. Bright lights, crisp suits. Rows of silent attention. I stood there, alone on that stage, heart pounding in a rhythm I knew all too well. But I didn't flinch. I told them everything. Not about the man. Not about the drama. But about the moment I realized silence isn't safety, it's surrender. I spoke about being overlooked, overwritten, and underestimated. I talked about building something in the dark and watching it get claimed by someone louder, older, more powerful. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. I ended my talk with this. Your voice won't always be welcomed. Your truth won't always be easy. But when it's backed by facts, and when it's delivered with clarity, it has the power to shake walls. Speak, even if your voice trembles. Speak, especially then. The applause was immediate. Not polite. Not performative. Real. Afterwards, people lined up to talk. A young woman in a navy blazer pulled me aside, eyes wide and voice shaking. "I've got a boss just like him," she said. "I've been scared to say anything. But hearing you," she swallowed. "Now I know I'm not crazy." That one sentence made everything worth it. Back at Stonebridge, things had shifted. My calendar was full, not with nonsense, but with real strategy sessions. People asked for my input, not as a formality, but because they knew it mattered. Junior analysts shadowed me. Executives stopped to ask for my opinion in elevators. One morning, I walked into the office kitchen and found a printed quote taped to the wall near the coffee machine. "You don't need to yell to change the world. You just need to say the one thing no one else will." Olivia Walker. I didn't put it there. A part of me wanted to tear it down. The attention still made me uncomfortable. But I didn't. Because somewhere, another girl like me might walk into that kitchen. She might be wondering if she belongs, if she's good enough, if her work will ever speak louder than her resume. And maybe that quote would be the thing that kept her going. This story isn't just mine. It belongs to every woman who's been silenced. Every first-gen kid who built success from scratch. Every employee who stayed up all night crafting something beautiful, only to have it stolen by someone with a better title. I didn't win because I fought harder. I won because I didn't back down. So if you're reading this, if you've ever been humiliated, dismissed, ignored, remember. One email. One truth. One voice can start an avalanche. And if they try to bury you again, make sure they remember who gave them the shovel. Don't just survive the room. Own it. Months passed. The scandal faded from headlines, from Slack whispers, from the passive-aggressive coffee chats in the break room. But the impact didn't fade, not for me, not for the company, and not for the people who finally saw that silence didn't equal weakness. My story had become something of a legend within Stonebridge. Not the gossipy kind. Not the kind that gets twisted into rumors or dramatized beyond recognition. No. This was something different, quieter, sharper. A signal. Analysts started saving their drafts with timestamps. Junior consultants began tracking who edited what. A quiet shift in culture had taken root. Not because I filed a lawsuit or screamed into a microphone, but because the truth had been undeniable enough to cause real consequence. Still, none of that changed the way some looked at me. There were those who would never forget that I'd stood up, and they resented me for it. Not because I'd done something wrong, but because I proved the system wasn't bulletproof. And to people who benefit from that system, nothing is more dangerous than proof. But I didn't let that stop me. I flew back to Texas in early December for a site visit with TexanGrid. The expansion phase had begun, and they wanted oversight from someone who understood both the numbers and the people. That someone was me. It was colder than usual in Austin that week. The sky hung low and gray, the wind cutting clean through my coat. Still, when I stepped off the plane and saw the skyline of my home state again, something in my chest unclenched. I was back where it had all started, not just the deal, but the version of me that never accepted being told, "Be quiet and stay in your lane." My mom met me outside the terminal. Same old Ford truck, same big smile. "You look different," she said. Her eyes soft. "Not tired. Like you finally put down something heavy." We drove past the diner where she used to work night shifts. Past the worn-out high school where I'd sat in a computer lab for hours after school because we didn't have Wi-Fi at home. Past the churches and dry fields and lonely roads that raised me. That night, I sat at the kitchen table where I once did homework under flickering lights. I opened my laptop, pulled up my latest revenue model, and looked at the spreadsheet like it was an old friend. Then I did something I hadn't done in a long, long time. I closed the lid. And I just sat there. Breathed. Because sometimes, winning isn't about recognition, or power, or money. Sometimes, it's about knowing you didn't let them take your voice, and you never will. You fought. You proved it. And now you get to build whatever comes next, on your terms. And that's what I want for everyone watching this, everyone listening, everyone reading between the lines. You might be underestimated. You might be overlooked. But if your work is strong and your truth is clear, then you are never powerless. Hold the receipts. Speak when it matters. And don't wait for permission to take up space. Because the moment you stop shrinking, the world has no choice but to adjust.